Hey guys, hoping all is well with everybody. In this video we're going to be continuing our read-along of heroic dogs, more specifically continuing our story of Seaman and Meriwether Lewis. So where we stopped last time we had learned a little bit more in depth about the Lewis and Clark expedition and a little bit of a biography of Meriwether Lewis. And continuing on, we're going to learn a little bit more about his dog Seaman. Seaman. Now, Meriwether Lewis's dog, Seaman, is both a famous dog and a dog that not much is known about. It was years before his name was definitely recorded, and no one is absolutely sure he made it back all the way to St. Louis and from the Lewis and Clark expedition, or what happened to him after that. Part of the mystery is caused by Lewis's off and on again journal writing and his awful handwriting combined with Clark's artful spelling. Also, Lewis and Clark were concentrating on longitudes and latitudes to make their maps, dealing with Indians, gathering biological specimens, and managing their men. Their journals were work products into which there were occasional notes about Seaman. While it is known that Seaman was a large Newfoundland dog, it is not known that he was black, but everyone later assumed that he was. Lewis bought the dog for $20 when he was waiting in Pittsburgh for the keelboat to be ready. That was a lot of money back then. Lewis's monthly pay during the expedition was $40 a month. Most farmers' income for a year was around $60. Newfoundland dogs are big, brave, intelligent, easygoing dogs and famous for being boat and water dogs, retrieving game and so forth. All good reasons for Lewis getting the dog. But he never let us know exactly why he did. So Seaman was the second member of the expedition, after Lewis. Lewis enjoyed Seaman's talent in catching squirrels on their trip down the Ohio to pick up Clark, mentioning that he'd caught many fat ones and that they made good eating. Seaman caught the squirrels in the river, then drowned and killed them. This is the way he hunted throughout the expedition. When they got to the meeting of the Ohio and Mississippi rivers in November of 1803, an Indian offered Lewis 3 beaver skins for the dog, and Lewis noted that, of course, there was no bargain. Seaman isn't mentioned again until July 5, 1804. Clark wrote in his journal, "We came to for the dinner at a beaver house. Captain Lewis's dog Seaman went in and drove them out." August 1804. On a 6-mile hike to see an Indian spiritual site, the dog became overheated and was sent home. Seaman was mentioned twice by Lewis in April 1805. In the first account, Lewis had a young buffalo follow him until frightened by the sight of Seaman. Later that month, they set out early by boat. Often Seaman roamed at night, but he hadn't returned yet. Lewis wrote in his journal, with his spelling, "I was fearful we had lost him altogether. However, much to my satisfaction, he joined us at 8 o'clock this morning." People have interpreted this to indicate how much Lewis was attached to his dog. Lewis was a solitary creature and often walked off by himself with Seaman for company and protection. Sergeant John Ordway also mentioned Seaman in his log in April. "Saw a flock of goats, pronghorn antelopes, swimming in the river this morning near to our camp. Captain Lewis's dog Seaman took after them, caught one in the river, drowned and killed it, and swam to shore with it." Ordway was the most diligent of the journal writers, not missing a single day's entry during the expedition. In May 1805, Seaman went to the river to fetch a beaver one of the corps had wounded. The beaver bit the dog's hind leg and severed an artery. This time Lewis entered. "I fear it will yet prove fatal to him." Fortunately, Seaman survived the bite, and just a few days later prevented a raging buffalo bull from stomping on the heads of sleeping crew. The buffalo had stumbled over one of the pirogues when trying to come ashore. Spooked, he ran directly through their camp that night. Seaman protected the men by making the bull change his course. Twice, in June 1805, Lewis mentioned Seaman's watchdog activities. Once, he prevented another bull from crossing the river to their camp. Another time, he barked all night, unsuccessfully attempting to keep grizzly bears from getting the buffalo fat they had hanging from a pole quite a distance from camp. The grizzlies managed to eat 30 pounds or so of the fat. The following month, Lewis twice praised Seaman's water hunting skills. The first time, one of the party had wounded a deer and it ran into the river. Seaman chased it, drowned it, and killed it. A few weeks later, Seaman captured and killed several geese. Prickly pear cactus was the bane of the trip. Blankets of the cactus lined much of their route along the Missouri River. The barbs penetrated their moccasins and leggings, causing additional damage to feet bruised and battered from walking on rocks. When they stopped for winter on the Pacific coast, they made 338 new pairs of moccasins with double soles, but these still let the barbs pierce the skin. Foxtail, a grass, has seeds that were also a constant irritant. In July 1806, Lewis wrote how they also affected Seaman. "My poor dog suffers with them excessively. He is constantly biting and scratching himself in a rack of pain." Sacagawea had been stolen from an area near where the Missouri meets the Rockies. When they neared the place she'd known as a child, she recognized some of the landmarks and helped the corpse reach her brother. They had hoped he could provide horses for their trek over the mountains. When they finally reached their tribe, Lewis remarked of their impressions of the corpse and of Seaman. "Every article about us appeared to excite astonishment in their minds, and the appearance of the men, their arms, the canoes, our manner of working them, the black man York, and the sagacity of my dog were equally objects of admiration." There was no mention of Seaman in the journals from August 1805 to April 11, 1806. In crossing the Rockies, both food and firewood were scarce, and the Indians less friendly. Some thefts occurred as well. In addition, 40 of their horses were stolen during their trip home. On April 11, 3 Wallala Chinook men stole Seaman and fled. Chased by armed men of the corps, they released the dog. After that, Lewis posted additional guards whenever they camped. On July 5, 1806, Lewis had seen swans on a pretty creek and admired them. Leaving, he made a note in his journal and called the creek Seaman's Creek. Years later, in 1987, a researcher came across the note and realized Seaman must have been Lewis's dog's name. Up until then, everyone thought the dog's name was Scannon, and many other dogs wore that name in honor of the expedition. On July 7, 1806, Lewis wrote that someone had wounded a moose and "my dog was much worried." The next and the last mentioned Seaman in Lewis's journals was on July 15, 1806. Mosquitoes had been thick and torturing the corpse. "The mosquitoes continue to infest us in such a manner that we can scarcely exist. For my own part, I am confined by them to my byre at least 3/4 that of the time. My dog even howls with the torture he experiences from them." What happened to Seaman? There is not much further mention of Seaman in any of the expedition journals. It is thought that Seaman returned from the trip based upon two things. If Seaman had died, he was important enough so that someone would have recorded his death in one of his journals. While Lewis wasn't the most regular of scribes, all the sergeants were required to make a daily record, and Clark barely missed a day in writing his. The other reason for thinking Seaman returned was found by Timothy Eldon, a preacher and historian. He published a book in 1814, American Epitaphs and Inscriptions. Entry 916 contained information about dog's collar in a Virginia museum. The entry included both what was inscribed on the collar and what was in the note that accompanied it. Later, a thank you note was found from the museum to William Clark for the curiosities he'd given the museum. A museum fire has prevented any further research on this, but many think it's reasonable that Clark had given Seaman's collar to the museum, and the written note, "The dog's collar was inscribed, 'The greatest traveler of my species. The name is Seaman, the dog of Captain Meriwether Lewis, who I accompanied to the Pacific Ocean through the interior of the continent of North America.'" The contents of the note. The fidelity and attachment of this animal were remarkable. After the melancholy exit of Governor Lewis, his dog would not depart for a moment from his lifeless remains, and when they were deposited in the earth, no gentle means could draw him from the spot of interment. He refused to take every kind of food, which was offered him, and actually pined away and died with grief upon his master's grave. As the stories of Seaman's death was reported in newspapers and many of the expedition members were alive to refute it, it is believed the story to be true. And that is the end of the story of Seaman and Meriwether Lewis. I hope you guys enjoyed the rest of the story, and we look to seeing you in the next story, which is going to be about Almo and Christensen. I hope you guys have a good day, take good care of yourselves, and we'll see you soon. Thanks for watching.